Incoming transmission.
Hey everybody, this is Ed Pogue. That's right, it's My Figure Universe and another Boosting the Signal. And this week, my guest needs no introduction. It's Larry Nemecek. Hey Larry, how's it going?
It's good. It's good. And I always want to go, no, no, introduce me. No,
Oh, okay. Well, all right, well, we try it over again. I was like,
no, I don't.
Larry, blah, 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 blah. Oh, you know him from Trekland Tuesday. You know him from Portal 47. You know him from the Trek Files. You know him from literally everything. Even if you've ever checked out Star Trek Continues, he was in 3 episodes of that. Come on, check it out. It's Larry Nemecek. Well, you were in
Actually,
three,
two.
weren't you?
No, the first two.
Well, you were
Oh,
in
well,
a,
I was an extra in the finale. I was in
yeah,
a
you were
gold
in
shirt.
Andorian. I remember that.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, okay. I was gonna say, maybe
I was a
question myself.
Tellarite in Lolani, but I was already McCoy in Lolani. So
No, okay. Okay. I was gonna say it's still worth going back and checking out. They're so much fun, you know. I
they
love
were
them.
a lot of people took a lot of pride in those too.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I'm glad they're out there for everybody. But how's everything going for you, Larry? Congratulations. By the time this airs, it's been a couple of months back, but congratulations on Portal 47 hitting 10 years. That is amazing. I any 10-year anniversary is worth celebrating.
Yeah, I had to kind of tell myself that instead of just like, keeping on doing the same thing, I had to stop and this time and say, I think Portal 47's 10 years is worth a little something. It's funny because it made me stop and think the way I do with everything else, sometimes like your own self, your own work is the last thing you look at.
Yeah.
Sometimes for a deficit, but I mean, even as a positive, it was like all the things I talk and boost and try to shed light on. And it's like, oh, well, what have you been doing? And, I don't know if my whole, it wasn't like a campaign to focus on backstage people, and how things are made. It wasn't like a conscious decision. It's just, that's just where my brain went when Star Trek took over my life or took over a part of my life. I still have another life, thank you. But that's just the way it happened. And then after a while, it turned into out of the gate it turned into, oh well, there's not a lot of people that, like, I'm not a typical fan, or I'm not a majority fan, I'll say that. And I talk about it all the time, but back the first awakening was like Interstat, and I'd see that 3/4 and 7/8 of the letters were all from mainly women talking about Spock and Ponfar back in those days, and fan fiction and the zine world and all that. And I was like, oh, I guess it's not a big thing to talk about background, but that's what I'll do, and I'll find the five other people who want to talk about that in the but it's like that's just what floated my boat, and here we are.
Well, honestly, I mean, if you put yourself out there and you find your niche in the community, as it were, you're going to find your people. You put you put it out there, and eventually they will. I guess to coin a phrase, if you build it, they will come.
Yeah.
But
Well, a lot of it in the beginning was, I mean, it was just where my passion went, right? And you just do, some people it's cosplay, some people it's model building, or it's AI CGI ships, or it's or some people are really analytical and they want to get into, they have, they're psychologists and sociologists or economists, or they're political scientists and they want to get in and analyze that. And and I enjoy that too. But
oh yeah,
everybody finds what, I mean, that's what's amazing about Star Trek, and that's what that really early Sandra Marshak and Myrna Colbreth. And I can only say that because I did a speech in college on the circuit about them. But Star Trek Lives was all about, each chapter was about one of the reasons Star Trek is so insanely popular, and not just popular, but like inventing a whole new thing, is that it has all these appeals that appeal to different people for different reasons. And that's all, I mean, that's basically been it for 60 years now coming up, is that there's so many things that different people can get out of, people say, oh, it's positive and it's futuristic. Well, okay, that's enough for some people are in crisis. They cling on to anything, and we all know the stories and we've seen the documentaries and the books about how many suicide preventions were, where how many people were, there's the there's the guys in Vietnam that saved their platoon by going to code signs from Star Trek. That's in Letters to Star Trek. I love that story. But it's part of it is just that it appeals to so many people. So we have this big broad fandom and people get what they want out of it. And anyway, for me it was I love that stuff, and then after a while I realized that I went to go find things and that I wanted to know and they weren't there. So I started to gap fill and canon smooth, or I like, and then I got tired of seeing fans talk about things. Zines were filled with, like podcasts now, things are filled with fans who are passionate, want to talk, they want to do, and fans don't have access to, the creators, much less the actors, unless they're in a rarefied situation. So everybody talks, and then you fill up your zine with that, or you fill up your podcast with that, and that's awesome. But me, I was like, okay, I've now seen the 17th person talk about Amok Time. I want to hear it from the people. I want to hear it from the horse's mouth, and that's what set me down that path.
Right.
And then after a while, it's kind of like, oh my God, these people, we're losing these people. We need to. I don't mean to make it a race, but we need to get in a race and record these people. And then it's like, well, you're talking to the writers. What about all the people who were on stage what about the stand-ins, and what about because they have stories too. And oh my gosh, now we've got to save those before they're gone. And
Yeah.
that's it. Just it's like I didn't sit down with a plan. It's just where it pulled me. And if anything about 10 years of, and I promise I'll shut up, if anything about 10 years of Portal 47, it's like I used to yell that nobody was doing this. And I don't know if it's just because everybody can do a fan film on their laptop now at home. Everybody does podcasting and YouTubing. I don't know if it's that, or if we're just so media savvy now from having a million channels and YouTube and everything, and DVD bonus features and all of that. If we're just finally getting more savvy about behind the scenes and the impact that it has on our show, and getting just, it's not 1960 or 1930 and we're just looking at stars, although God love them, we all love them, and most of them have such great hearts and they enjoy being in Star Trek. But I want to I'd like to think, although it wasn't a mission, part of it was just me trying to survive with Star Trek in a legal way. But I'd like to think that maybe we've had kind of a mini boom about people, like more of the backstage folks are being paid attention to and being recorded, and their stories are getting out there. So if I had anything to do with that, yay.
Well, I think you did. I mean, not to boost your ego in any way, shape, or form, but I think you've had an immense amount of impact on the fandom itself. I'm sure you have been told many times by people, be it your books, anything, your podcasts, your interviews, your speeches, and whatever else. The case is, you have inspired. I've had conversations. I've told you before. Like, you inspired the title of this podcast. I mean, that's not
Oh,
even. I mean, you once told me, and I know you'd said you say boosting the signal is very much a common nomenclature people will say, but to me,
uh,
I had never heard it until you thanked me for
oh,
sharing something, and you said, "Thank you for boosting my signal," and I went, "I like that," and 6 months later, here we are.
there you
But
go.
and even like I think back to 15-year-old me sitting upstairs in my parents' home in my bedroom by myself with Deep Space Nine on the TV in the background, and I'm reading through your book, memorizing it. It was the Star Trek Next Generation Companion, to clarify, and
You were
I,
reading the TNG Companion while you were watching DS9?
TNG was over by this point, so
Oh, okay. I didn't, well,
yeah,
they
it
did
was
rerun. Yeah.
yeah, so it was, but yeah,
Oh,
but
you were
still in the book
multi-channel.
it's
Okay.
yeah, the knowledge was great, and so it became an inspiration. It kept the fandom alive, and I could say very similar things to Michael and Denise Okuda if ever given the opportunity. But yeah, I mean you've inspired and you've kept things alive. So this does bring me to this. You mentioned you touched on Star Trek, talking about it legally or whatever, keeping it alive legally. What was your moment? What was your moment when someone reached out to you and said, "Your love of Star Trek needs to be official," like your first book, your whatever it was. What was that step that brought you in into an official capacity, something that had Paramount's name on it?
Oh, well, I guess it was like multiple steps. Okay, so A, I had this passion. B, in various ways, I had to, it's like people have to make costumes or people have to write their fan fiction. I had to I had to organize. I had to gap fill and canon smooth. I just felt the urge. It's like, well, they went this far, and I started fandom at a time when you didn't know that there'd ever be any more Star Trek, right? Like
Right.
I was not an NBC kid, but I was a rerun baby, as I always say. And half of the reason for fandom was just demanding that there be more Star Trek, much less just celebrating what was. And for a while, it was in a vacuum, and people just felt really free to create. And we had different versions of things. And then you got the motion picture. And then we realized that 2 hours every 2 or 3 years was not going to satisfy the demand we had, until we had a series again. But my first things on paper were organizing the making of book because it had no index, and then filling in pages missing from the tech manual, and then realizing all the stars that were just loose in the concordance, and like, would that make sense? And I went into these like that, and then almost thought I was going to be published. Jeff Mandel and I wrote about the medical reference. He wrote me back finally. We talked. He was intrigued that I had done this star chart system. He was going to do a nonfiction backstage in universe kind of tech manual again. And we were all set for that. And then the world changed. It's a long story, but basically, I came this close to being professionally published and then wasn't.
Mm.
And I was so disappointed. I was like, okay, look at this. I put all this energy and time into this. I need to get back. I kind of said I need to get a life before get a life
Get a life.
was a phrase. And I said, I'm just going to get on and I've got other things to do. I got to get a job and get through college and decide what I'm doing. And then comes the next generation. And I got all, but I never walked away from Star Trek and the movies were. But next gen comes along and I went, ooh, okay. At the same time as the home computer of Macs, basically,
Right.
and desktop publishing and laser printers. And I said, I want to do Bijo's concordance only for next generation, and I want to do it my way. And so I started on index cards, but I got transferred to FileMaker and Macintosh. Uh, and I started keeping a database that way, and then publishing a yearly kind of an annual concordance zine. And after one or two of those, um, long story short, Richard Arnold, who was Gene Roddenberry's assistant, saw it and had a cow. He's like, "Oh my God, we could, this is before kids, before the Akuda's Encyclopedia, before Memory Alpha, before anything." And
Yeah.
it was just the first year of Next Gen, and he had a conniption fit. I mean, in a good way. He was like, "Oh my God." I had written to him. I met him at a con finally when I started going out of state to cons, and then I wrote him to invite him to our convention. And as a on throwaway, I said, "Oh, by the way, here's the first year of my concordance that I do." And he wrote me back and went on and on and on and on and on about that. And then at the end said, "Oh yeah, I'll come to your convention." But what that did was he said, "We're sending scripts to Bijo and she's not doing anything with them." And oh my God, this is so great. You have a few words spelled wrong that were proper names, and I'll help you spell those, like you couldn't get from listening to your taped, your VHS tape you made. Because I didn't
Yeah.
have any scripts or anything. And that was what, and then he kept harping about we need to do this. But at the same time, they had internally decided, and Mike and Rick were doing their tech manual. Finally, it finally came out, and at the same time, they wanted to do a making of book, and they also decided to have Mike and Denise basically do an overall instead of letting Bijo's companion or concordance stand alone and do a TNG standalone. They decided to, if we're going to have multiple series, to merge everything into one database, and that's where the encyclopedia. So they said, Larry, we're going to have the Akudas do this encyclopedia. Can you do a making of book instead of a concordance? And I was like, oh, well, that's totally different, but okay, sure. And can you do it in 3 months? So that was my first. So it was like there was a totally beyond me. I just put my product out there, which is what I keep seeing happening over and over again. If you do it, they will come. But sometimes the people who come are the people who are the masters of the universe. And
Yeah,
in this case, it was Richard saying, you should have, he was going to licensing and saying, you should have Larry do this. Look, he's already got, he kept saying, he's already got it done. He's already got it done. Well, I'm thinking of Stephen Poe in the making of Star Trek, like that level. And it was all I could do not to, because like I can't put out crap. I can't put out something that's just got Star Trek slapped on it and expect us to buy it. I couldn't do that. And I went bonkers, and there was so much more I wanted to do with the Blue Companion. But that's what it was. I had to, as much as sometimes I wanted to get Richard and shake him back in the day.
I think it's
Uh,
funny what
I
you say about the making of Star Trek
I
because
own that.
I remember the first time I read that. It's all just like, how much did this cost? I was like, I don't care what it cost. I don't want to know what things cost. Just tell me how they made it, not who they paid to make it.
But eventually, you appreciate that.
Eventually.
Yeah, because then you go, oh, really? It was so cheap, or really they made it for that, and it looks like that, or or whatever, or really if they'd had more money to spend, it would have looked like Lost in Space and glitzy instead of
Yeah,
yeah. It's like a good Star Trek is like a good. They used to talk about Warner Brothers classics that way, like or something where the kids get it on one level, but the adults get it on another level, and everybody gets something out of it. And the older you get, well, that should be true of anything, actually. The older you get, and the more time goes by, and the more the world changes around you, you go back and revisit something every 5 or 10 years at least, and you see it through new eyes or new layers,
yeah.
right?
Oh,
And
that's
Star Trek is that way,
100%.
yeah. Especially if you were a
100%.
kid when
Like
you came to it.
I've been watching Voyager over again, and there are so many aspects of episodes of Voyager that hit harder now for me as an adult that has lived through things and can look at things through even I don't even want to say an adult eye, but like even like the times that we are in now, they are very and it's Voyager. I mean, usually you'll say, "Oh, Star Trek or Twilight Zone." They're universal and they never change, and you can always come back to them somehow. But
Mm-hmm.
Voyager is not one I ever thought about. And then as I'm watching them, like, yeah, I mean, there was an episode. And this is bad. I can't remember the name, but there was one where Jerry Ryan's Seven of Nine had accused an alien of, uh, for lack of better terms, holding her down and taking her Borg nanites against her will, and she accused the guy. Ends up
Right.
it was falsely accused, and I thought, oh my, this is kind of in the Me Too era, and I thought,
Well, it was no, except that it was 10 years before,
yeah,
20 years before the Me Too.
25 years prior,
Yeah.
yeah, and it's like, but it was very apropos for now because I mean, in that situation, there's plenty of people that were guilty, but there were others that were falsely
We're
accused,
just
and
scooped up in the maniac. Yeah.
yep.
Yeah.
So yeah, you never know when something is going to be, universal and such as that. And I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
And you're right. I appreciate it now. So,
Yeah.
one
But
thing I've
that's
always
that's
wanted to ask.
how that's how that's why I tell everybody it's interesting. Like Dan Madsen, when he was one of hundreds, probably dozens, if not hundreds, of people to do a fan newsletter, especially in the early days. And then when the motion picture came out, he just had this simple little 4-page type thing, and he was a kid in his parents' basement
Hmm.
because he was a kid in his own bedroom. He was still at home, and rather than send him a cease and desist letter, the studio liked what they were doing, and they didn't have a well, Gene liked what he was doing, and when legal and licensing were about to send him a cease and desist, like they probably were a lot of people when the movie came out, and they thought things would gin up financially, and
Yeah.
so they didn't. It wasn't like, oh well, we're just scraping by here, hoping anybody pays attention to us. Well, now we knew, and they were spending money, but Gene saw what he was doing and said, why don't we bring him in instead of shutting him down? And that's where
Oh,
the old official fan club and the but any like or anybody that came out in one of those flex moments, in those, what are they called, those transition moments when you
yeah.
don't
Transitional
even realize
time
it,
where there was
like,
nothing.
yeah, Tony and TrekMovie.com was
Oh
another
yeah.
one that he was the one that kind of came up and had it together, and now and then created it, not only an institution but inspired other people to do kind of the same thing in different ways, and that's what Dan did then. And so I don't know if anything I've done has been that way. But I appreciate it. A lot of people. It was weird like 10, 15 years ago when people started to come up and say they'd have like their companion, their blue one, the first one, and say like they'd have me sign it, and this was the first book I bought with my own money, or this was best Christmas gift I ever got, and I'm like, oh, because that's the way I would think about Dorothy's Concordance and Steve
Yeah,
Poe's making of, or the medical ref. That's the way I've thought about those books. So all I've ever tried to do is go, well, if this can affect you or inspire you or give you entertainment hours the way those did for me, then I guess boosting the signal is one thing and passing it on is another thing. So
yeah.
yay.
I am. My whole thing is I want to inspire, and I love that when people can inspire, and I want to get like having you on and talking to you is inspirational not only for me but hopefully
Oh,
for others. I would hope that there would be individuals that would see this and say nothing is impossible. Like you you can try whatever you want. You can put it out there. You can tell your fandom. You can help your fandom, and you can help those give voice to the voicelessness. And that was the point. That was the whole point of this. Is like there are not to say that you don't need my help. You don't need my boost per se.
oh no,
And
you're awesome. Ed, wait. It's
oh yeah,
just
oh, okay.
seeing the barrage of just what I'm especially the way the landscape is now. I mean, how we get information and how we
Yeah.
get anything, and just you're goofing off and you're clicking through Instagram reels or stories or maybe even YouTube, and just to see it's almost like here's your daily. I know you don't think of it this way, or maybe you do. Here's your
Oh
daily collated sampling of things. Even if you only see it for 5 or 10 seconds, it's good that you saw it for this 5 or 10 seconds. And then to pop up in those every once in a while, go, oh, because I know I had, entrepreneur business coaching, creatives for a while. I had plenty of social media people over the years, workshops and seminars, and people want to hire out cheap and people want to hire expensive. I mean, there's all this stuff. And I know I go back to the old days of we would do community theater or we would do cons.
hmm.
And everybody gets so into what they're doing, they forget they need to also tell the world about it.
Yeah.
And I would see, conventions. Those are the two things that come to mind. Conventions and small theater. They get so into doing what they're doing, and then they finally open and they wonder why there's nobody there. Well, you have to tell people. Part of your work has to be telling people. You can't just do it. If you make it, they will come in magical movies sometimes, and they will come, but you got to help them a little. And so
Yeah. Oh
anyway,
yeah.
so I forget to do that a lot, even though I know better. Like, here's what you're supposed to do on all the platforms. So somebody like you doing that without even thinking, I have some fans who do that also, and it's just like, oh, thank you for doing that, because it's like, and it's not even like you're adding on to what I'm doing. It's like, oops, I forgot to to say something or do something.
And that's the
You
one thing
know?
I always try to make it like I'm not trying to steal someone's product. I'm trying to put it
Oh
out there. It's
no.
like, like, hey, check this out. I don't want you to miss this. Yeah, and
Oh,
that's
Ed, the early day, I learned a, I learned a million lessons when I first got out of my little shell. And not that I was hiding, but when I first made the bridge from Oklahoma to LA and saw how things worked. But one of them is the first time, and I wasn't even getting paid for it, but the first time I actually, back in the days when creation would do like 4 conventions a weekend or something every weekend, but
yeah,
their convention would be like one actor. They would rent 2 rooms of a ballroom at some hotel near an airport, and one room I say one room is the dealer room and one is the not dealer room. And they would have an actor go in and sign, and maybe two, but if it was a small city, one person. And uh, and then if there was a local fan group, they might let the local fans do some. Anyway, those little suburban little, I used to call them carpetbagger cons because I came from fandom cons. But the first time I ever talked on stage about the companion was in Wichita. So I drove 3 hours up to Wichita, and Marina was late. She was the guest, and she was late getting in. But it's the first time I did a panel on stage about the companion era, and I talked about how I did it.
Hmm.
And as I was halfway through, I don't know if I had some slides, which would have been horrible. I probably didn't have any slides, nothing visual, just me talking and droning. And I realized, like halfway through, this is the most boring, god awful thing you could throw at fans. Like, people love the book was selling. It's not like but it's like this is not the way to, well, A, entertain people and get another invitation to talk sometime. But B, it wasn't like doing anything any justice. And what I finally, and because I would, part of the mantra early on was like, well, I don't work on the show. I'm so envious of like Mike and Denise and Rick and those guys who were doing books, but they also have a foot on the show. They're there and they're creating, but they don't have to ask somebody, they don't have to interview someone. It's them. They're just
Yeah.
taking their head, you're downloading your brain onto paper or whatever. And I used to carry that around and think, well, so, oh, I love your book, blah, 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 blah. And I'd always want to go, yeah, but I don't work on the show now. Like, don't, and finally it hit me. And it's like, well, when I got into talking to everybody, when I talked to the Bob Blackmans and the Mike Westmores and the Dan Currys and, all the way up and down, um, it was like, especially in those days, it's eased up between DVDs and now cons and podcasts and YouTubes. But in the day, it was like, those people, they have all these wonderful stories, and they're not going to be, sadly, no convention is going to ask them to be a guest.
Yeah.
And the day that it crystallized for me was I was at one of Steve Walker's Denver cons, which used to be the holy grail of how a Star Trek only con should be, the Starland, Star Cons and Starfest in Denver. And I want to say it was Jonathan Frakes, but one of the TNG actors was on stage, and it kept happening over and over again. People would ask a question in the Q&A, and I think it was Jonathan. He would say something to the effect of, you know what? That's a Michael Westmore question. Or you know what? That's a Dan Curry question. Or you know what? That's a Bob Blackman. That's an Alan Sims question for. And I'm sitting there in the audience going, well, then why aren't they on stage? You're like, look, it's not just me. These people want to know too. And then I had this, like, and in the paradigm of the day, I'm thinking, someday I'm going to do TechCon and I'm going to have all those people and they're all going to be, on stage and not stars, but they're all going to be spotlighted and heard, and 12 people will show up and I'll go broke, but at least I did it once.
Well, and I get that. I get that 100%.
But now we found, but the biggest thing in my head was getting over this thing about what am I gonna, I feel like I can do something here as a middleman. What can I do? And there's no shame in being a middleman. And what I finally realized at that time was, you know what, they're all sitting in Hollywood or wherever, and they have all this great information and stories and insight, and it's not getting to fans. So they'll tell it to me. I'll use it in books or articles or whatever, but there is so much more that doesn't get in a book. There's so much more that doesn't get into, there's so much more than an interview that doesn't get out. A stage time is even 30 minutes or 45 minutes, and they could talk for 17 hours,
Yeah.
So so where my head got to about all that was I will be the person that shares, and then eventually I realized records their all of that, their memories, their insights, their why did I do this, the why we didn't do this, all of that I'll convey to people. So I don't have a guilt, no, I don't work on the show, but I'm going to bring you all of this information that they have no way to get to you firsthand. Now, 20 and 30 years later, we're in a world where bit by bit they are getting out, or they are
Yeah.
talking to a camera because the stupid studio is responding to a world where people do want that. And they realize if we have a DVD or a Blu-ray release every 8 years, we need fresh bonus material. So that has all shifted. But back in the day, I had to find a reason to do something without feeling guilty or um, without feeling like I was misrepresenting myself. So that was the comfort zone. I said, okay, I will be the keeper and the teller of tales for those who have no other way to do that. Does that make
A
sense?
historian.
But I
You
had to be, yeah, which duh is a story. But in my head, that I had to get to that because I could it's like what am I putting myself out there for? Like because just talking about my craft, which was how we do the it's like, well, that was boring as hell.
I look at it this way though. What you do though is wonderful because that you're putting that
Well, it has
content
shifted a
there.
little bit. I'll shut up again, but I'm just saying
No, that's
it has
fine. No, you
shifted.
don't have to shut up.
It's not just no. I can I you just to, since you're going to go this way, I'll just say this real quick. In the old days, in the original days, it was collect fact, collect fact, collect fact, and you can listen to some of these interviews I put out on the CDs, but there's times
You're
a
up to
thousand
five
more.
CDs, right?
Yes,
Wow.
yes, yes. And we stopped 10 years ago, and I still need to digitize all these cassette tapes. But the idea was in those days, it was like, let's sit down. We have an hour or a couple hours, and I'm going to like scrape everything out of your brain, Ira Bear, or everything out of your brain, Ron B. Moore or Ron D. Moore, whichever one. And because I'm selfish, I want it. And then
Yeah.
there's a little piece of me that's thinking, well, I will take it, and then I can do books and I can do magazine articles for ages, and I don't have to bug you anymore. And then real quick, I went, oh, and plus you're freshest right now as you will ever be with this memory material.
Oh yeah.
And then when they did the DVDs, and I know and effects Ron wrote me and he said, Larry, do you still have those interviews? Do you have transcripts or something? Because I'm supposed to be interviewed for the Blu-rays, and a lot of this is blurring together for me.
See, and you
And I
helped.
said, sure, Ron. He says, thank God we sat down and talked for 2 hours every season. So it's
Uh,
like, oh, it's just weird how I didn't start off this again. You don't know what's going to happen, but after a while, it was like, oh, this is a pretty good, amassed archive here of, but they're not entertaining. The difference partly between now and then was back then it was just like fact, 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 get it down.
Well,
And
see, it depends on
now,
who you're talking to, Larry, because someone like me, that's like Johnny number five, input, input, input. I want that input. So, you're putting it out there. That's going to be entertaining. And it's like your Trek Land Tuesdays, TTLs on Tuesdays. Even if you have just a simple subject that you want to talk about, like the vast nothingness that we are in Star Trek currently, or what will happen in the future, that's input because your thoughts produce thoughts and theories from those in the chat, and that's, to me, that's wonderful. It's more input. So
yeah.
it's all good.
All I was going to say was there's times today when we do, YouTubes and you have
Yeah.
people on, and sometimes it's just like the thing about the Tuesday live show is because Trek Files is a specific thing. It's supposed to be things from Gene's files or people's own letters from back in the day from Gene or The Office,
Right.
and they're shorter, but it's a professional or an in the family guest, and hopefully we're really talking on a on a higher plane or something really really deep back that the witnesses are, and occasionally it's Jonathan Frakes or it's George Takei, but most of the time it's people, again, it's the people that you haven't heard from, or it's people who are fading.
Yeah.
I've tried to have some of the folks from the fanzine, the 70s, 60s and 70s and 80s world that is fading now, but making sure people understand, like getting them recorded and on the record. But everything that we do today, it feels like there's a little bit of a need to be for an audience.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that in a bad. I mean, when I say it has to be a show, I mean you have to. I don't have to worry. I there's times when I wish I all I want to do is just sit down and suck somebody. And I've done some of those lately for some of the newer shows. And I don't know what I'm going to use it for, but I'm just sucking them dry when they feel like doing that. And hopefully they knew what I've done in the past and they'll do it and
Yeah.
be happy. And some of them want to get something. Like, I don't know when I'm ever going to tell this to somebody else, so I'll tell you. But I don't have to worry. I can be as boring as I need to be. I don't have to worry. I don't have to worry about entertaining somebody. I don't have to turn around and know that somebody's watching, and we need to throw in a joke here, or I need to, and not that I do that all the time otherwise, but it's like, is there an audience, or are we just doing this, to collect the facts for history? Which
I
sounds kind
think
of pompous, but
no,
I,
no. I honestly, if you're asking me, like if you wanted my honest to goodness opinion, if you were putting the facts out there for history and so that they can be recorded, to me that means more than being entertained. I wouldn't need the jokes. I wouldn't need, you don't need to wave pom poms at me or anything.
Yeah.
It to me the information is vital because society itself right now is it needs that. And if even if it's just a small niche group
Hmm.
of people, that information can live on. Otherwise, we're getting closer to idiocracy, and I don't. I wouldn't want that. I would rather,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Anyway, I just, when you're doing something on a recording or on camera, you're conscious about needing to organize and your time limited usually. There have been a couple of people that I had on Portal 47 that I hadn't had as a guest on guest night, which is, the paywall. It's just the subscribers, but the members. But Tim Peel was the graphics guy for all modern Trek except for Picard because it was in LA.
mm,
And we went, and he's a fan, and he was very proud of a lot of the work that they had done. And he knew that a lot of people had no idea the depths of what they'd done. And so much of it is not, I mean, it's 99% not spoilerific now. The years are going by. Anyway, he stayed on. I think he's the record. He stayed on. We had a 4 hour Portal 47 guest night. And I know all the East Coast people had fallen. But what it turned into partway through was just a me doing a sit down, only I happened to have the camera going. And
yeah.
part of me was like, but that's the kind of thing where on one hand, you've got subscribers who have paid for this, you know, and some of them are East Coast and they start at 10 o'clock when we have, most of our events are 7 Pacific. So they start at 10. And so 4 hours got to be, 2 a.m. when we finish, but they're all recorded. If they fell asleep, they'll get this. Where
Yeah.
the hell else are they going to get 4 hours with him talking about the graphics of Strange New Worlds and Discovery? And am I missing something? Even Section 31. Um, Picard was over here, but it's like okay, it's like that's a kind when I went. You know what? I know some of them are going to fall off. I don't think anyone's going to curse me, even though they're paying for it because they know it's recorded. They can see it anytime, but they also know that we got it for the betterment of
Posterity.
Trek humanity. Yeah, for posterity.
Yeah.
So that's a time when, but that's what I mean when I say the needs of the two, are in conflict a little bit. And that was one time when I went, I'm not producing this. I'm just going to sit down and we're just going to scrape every barrel you roll in front of me until we're done.
Oh no, and
And
that's the thing. You talk about time, Larry. Like I'm very conscious that our time is fastly going by.
I told
And
you,
it's
I'm
like, oh
sorry.
no, it's fine. I have like 47 other questions for you. That's our 47 reference there. And
Yeah,
but I could pick one specific episode of the show and we could probably have a 3 hour conversation about it. And I love that. But I do. I gotta focus on one of the things. One of my biggest things
sure.
here is um, like I want you to be able to tell people more about where to find you before we run out of that time. I mean,
Oh yeah,
I'm
the
hoping
concept.
most people know where to go find you, but like, tell us about Portal 47 and the Trek files and such and such.
Yeah. Okay, well, LarryNemecek.com is kind of a central hub. Larry Nemecek on all the socials, especially Twitter X. I still am there. Blue Sky is feels like old Twitter to me, but Instagram and Facebook. There's a Larry's Trekland on Facebook, um, and YouTube. Which in the beginning YouTube was like a free server for your videos to be on your blog,
Yeah.
and then I was like, somebody said when I started working on Portal 47, YouTube is bigger search engine than Google is. And I'm like, what? So anyway, I got into the YouTube race late. So everybody please go subscribe because that's where everything sits. So Tuesday's live happens around 1 o'clock Tuesday, but it's not monetized and it's not on a network. So we sit down and get to it. If I'm on time at 1 o'clock, you can tell it's a guest day because I have to tell guests a time and then they're there live. But I've been very proud on Tuesdays live since we started having. I've been proud of it. It started off as just my entrepreneur group saying, "Get on live" back in 2017. Like, just get on Facebook Live or Periscope on Twitter
I
and
remember
just be
Periscope.
live.
Wow,
Yeah.
that
But
was a
the
fun time.
but then things, it's like World War II or the Depression or something. It's like things evolved so fast with the pandemic. The silver lining of the pandemic was, people got savvier even about
Yeah,
virtual, and the techs got there and the apps got there, and I started having guests that I could do as a one man band. And I remember when the strike started. I remember the 0708 writer strike, and I knew that fandom in general had no clue what was about to happen. Do you hear this abstract talk about a strike? Like, what does that mean? What does it look like? And at the time back then, there was nothing but the new movie coming that nobody knew anything about. But now we had active Trek happening that was going to get interrupted, and I was like, oh my god, this is happening. They're really going to go through with a strike. And I tried to tell people the week or two before on Tuesdays Live, but then what killed me was the first week they were actually on strike. It was liberating to meet all these lawyers. These lawyers. It was great to meet all these writers and creatives that the studio had in lockdown because they're so spoiler scary, and
yeah,
things are Toronto and New York based, that I didn't have a chance to really talk to any of these people. And through the strike, you could slide into the DMs of Instagram and Twitter and talk to people. And I had talked once or twice to Bill Wilkoff way back then, and I realized he was a strike captain. He was at Disney in Burbank, and I'm just and not face to face. But I asked him. I said, "Do you think it would work? Could you get on live with me for my live show, and we just talk as you picket? You don't have to stop picketing. You can just talk as you walk along." I said, "I think the Wi-Fi outdoor at Disney and in Burbank is strong enough that we can pull this off." And he said, "Yeah, sure." So the Tuesday after the first Monday of the strike, I had Bill Wilkoff for 30 minutes talking about the strike and the Writers Guild, and a little. They weren't supposed to talk about their show, but he couldn't help talk. Well, that's the show that I work on is blah, blah. But we got finished, and I thought, geez, like who else is doing this or thinking to do it or has pulled this off? I was very proud of that. But
yeah,
just to
as well you
say that
should be.
the YouTube is where that and my cadet Alice with Prodigy and my granddaughter Alice, we talk about that every episode. And and I never think to talk about Second Opinion, which is my reaction show to Fresh Trek when it happens. Scott would shoot me if I did. But everything, my YouTube is way behind being underdeveloped. But I have to say also, Portal 47 is the business of backstage, the package every month with guest night and all that. That's what we just had 10 years of. And the Trek tours that I do, the day tours, anytime anybody's in LA, we can work it out ahead of time, pick 4 places. That's Trekline Treks. And then also next year, not to be confused with my day tours, is the big multi-day tour, which we haven't done in 10 years with Geek Nation Tours, which is like 4 or 5 days, and it's the week before the Vegas convention. So anybody looking for a big splash like that, I've got a link on my page, but it's geeknationtours.com.
Speaking of big splashes, this coming February, you're going to be on the Trek cruise.
Oh, I saw what you did there. Yeah, that's kind of like it's their ninth one, and for many years I was like, I'd love to be a guest. I'd love to. And they have behind the scenes, and they have
Yeah,
like non-actor guests. And it finally happened last year, and I had a great time. And then I don't mind saying on the side, they've had me help with some of the like putting a Trek layer on some of their marketing for the year before and during. And I got to write six different actors specialized trivia for their character that seemed to go over really well, and doing that again. So no, the cruise is amazing if you can get there. It's only like it's got a upper limit 2,000 people or something.
but it's not. It's out of my price range. But yeah,
Yeah.
probably around there.
Um, and they have specials now. The other thing though is, and I've been watching, the economy, how it's going. They were 70% sold out before they came back to dock last year.
Wow.
Yeah. So this one sold out even more quickly than last year's did. But the last 3, 4, 5 years, they've been pretty much they're 80, 90. They're only having to sell the last 10% of the, and they
Didn't they
run
announce?
ECP.
Didn't they announce guests though during it?
They keep, yes, they
Yeah.
end up with announcing a three-fourths the guests, but then they keep what's insane is that they were sold out and they keep adding guests. I'm like, well,
Yeah.
what's okay, fine. But they ECP, it's Entertainment Cruise Partners, but they do some other theme tours, uh, other theme cruises. Like they have a Star Trek. They just partnered with San Diego Comic Con to do a Comic Con cruise, but they have an '80s and a '90s cruise that's like bands and comedians and things. And they even have a cruise for bikers,
Wow.
which I know. I was like, do they bring their bikes on the ship? No, they don't bring their bikes on the ship, but we do. But they have several themes like that, six or eight, and they run a tight ship. They are, I mean, I say that they're a well-oiled machine. They're incredible. Their people are great. There's nothing. And people from Paramount from the studio licensing are there, kind of keeping an eye. And then it's on Norwegian Cruise Lines, so that's like
Nice.
they're keeping an eye. Like there's the cruise line who vendors out to ECP, and ECP has a license from Paramount for Star Trek on this one. And so but it's an amazing experience. If you can go once, I'd say go. But we're getting to do two in a row here. I don't know if we'll make it three, if they'll have me back or rested or whatever, but I'm gonna go enjoy. And next year the theme is for the 60th. They have a
Yeah.
theme every year. Last year it was Voyager's 30th. Um, Especially since Voyager's 25th cruise kind of got robbed by the pandemic.
Yeah.
So
Hopefully we.
anyway.
I know that the one thing that did come out of that was they did a lot of recording for the To the Journey documentary during
Hmm.
that, and really hoping that we get our copies of those sometime soon. It's a wonderful documentary. I've already seen it, but I want that physical copy.
Yeah. Yeah.
But no, I hope you have a great time on the cruise. I really do. By the time anyone is seeing this, it's going to be really close to that time. So and
Well, it's like I said, I'm not selling tickets for them because it's been sold out for
yeah,
ages. But yeah.
but
So, but no,
still,
that's, and of course, I haven't done as many cons lately. I still, Vegas every year and San Diego, find a way to go there. I haven't been on the East Coast in ages. I'd love to get back over. Hadn't been over to England or to the UK or to Germany. And we used to be every year through in like the 90s and the first half of the aughts. Um, for 12 years there. It was like almost every year we were in England or Germany, but I missed that. I'd love to go back over FedCon or one of the destinations or Warp or something, but just getting East Coast again, just because Midwest, yay, and West Coast, yay, but I miss seeing a lot of the East Coast. That's what's great about Portal though, is because in the
yeah.
era of Zooming, and we were free conference calling 5 years before 90% of the world knew what Zoom was. So that was kind of awesome. I was again, you're just trying to get something done. And then 10 years later, you go, oh, well, look, we were pioneering this. Well, we were just trying to find a way to, how can I make some money in a licensed IP franchise, and still and pull all this service and do all these things that I want to do while at the same time pay some bills.
Well,
And you do what you do, and then you look back later and go, oh, well, good, we started something here, yay.
well, think about it. Star Trek has always been on the forefront of things before it became popular, be it cell phones or
Oh yeah.
tablets or anything else. So anyone Star Trek adjacent, being on the forefront of like Zoom makes sense. It's the way it should be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I guess I shouted out Dan, I shouted out Tony. And thank goodness that when like the era of Discovery seemed to overlap with when all the algorithms almost strangled us before we knew what was coming.
Yeah.
And all the toxic tubers, I used to call them, were out there, and people were like, "What happened to our pretty fandom?" And one of those concepts is, well, gang, online fandom is not the same as all fandom. And even like convention going fandom isn't just like, if you get online, that's not representative of all fans. You're not looking at all the armchair fans. And even live in person fandom, which there are no toxic negative people there. Well, occasionally there's somebody, but at least you can look at them in the face. It seems to disappear the minute you get face to face, right? That when you can cut out the algorithms and we're back to a human equation, 99.9% of the folks you meet at conventions are popular, or at least they're your old bar bantering buddy, like, well, I like this, well, I like that. And then you both tear each other down in the fun way, that kind of thing. But it's like there's such a great fandom out there. I call them the armchair fans. It's like they just enjoy the show. And maybe they buy a book, and maybe they buy action figures, or they buy a ship model, but they just like to watch the show. And that's really what most fandom is. And so, hey, Zoom and podcasts might get to more of those people, but I know for a long time I'd be at a con and say, how many people listen to a podcast? It'd be like 10% of the room out of 300 people. So it's like podcasts got big, and maybe even YouTubers, and maybe now a little more. But it's, again, it's still not, it's still not as desperate as your article. I just want to bring this to you all. Here's my passion. I just want to bring this to you. And, it gets there, but and we're evolving and the world's changing, but
One of
it's,
the best things
keeping
I've
things.
heard recently, Doug Drexler made a statement. He was talking about his documentary, which is thankfully fully funded,
Yay. Yes.
and
Yay, Doug.
he was talking about. He
Love
said
Doug.
the one thing about Star Trek is we're all family. Even if you've never met someone, and that first time you meet them, and maybe they're wearing a Star Trek shirt, or they say something you recognize, and you
They have a
instantly
pin
you're
on or
family.
something. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like
Yeah.
it's like there's no fighting. We're all one group, and I love that, and it's so true. Like, I mean, honestly, this is the first time you and I have ever spoken, but I knew that going into this, there would be no lack of conversation. Like I said, I could
Oh,
pick an episode off the shelf, and we could talk about it for 3 hours, um, and I
yeah.
love that. But Larry, we could keep going forever, but we can't. I know that you are on a time crunch, and I do not want to take away from that. But so I want to thank you so much for all of your time here today. And I
Oh,
want to
Ed.
implore
My gosh.
everyone
Thank you.
to, follow you, check you out, go to Portal 47, get on the Patreon with Larry.
Oh, see, I
Uh,
didn't even talk about that. I have a little baby Patreon. Yes.
but,
Patreon.com/Tuesday Live, I think. I have
but
to
we'll
look
put
at
it
my.
on the screen for everybody, and all of the links are going to be below for everybody. There you go. You can hold up your, yeah,
I was
your,
going to say, if you know how we do. See, this is what in 2017 I said, I don't have I can't afford a crew. You need camera people. You need an editor for.
yeah,
And one of my coaches said, it doesn't matter. Just get live. Just get out there. Hold up cards, if nothing else. Like, if you don't want to do graphics, so you don't have the time to do graphics. So
yeah,
there, everybody. There's your official Tuesdays Live sign for my Patreon. But I keep it very simple because I'd rather people just join Portal,
yeah.
and do that.
Yeah,
But
and yeah, I'll make sure everything's on the screen. I implore everyone to check it out. Um, and yeah, I
but
mean,
my gosh, I sound like a missionary here, but I see other people. I guess I've done the same thing, but it's like, if you just have something you want to share, just find a way to do it. Don't worry about it
yeah.
being polished. Don't worry about it being, if you have no money. Good Lord, we live in a world now where it's easier to do more with less than ever before.
Oh yeah.
So,
I have
so
I have no money, Larry. I have no money. Everything that you see here is me. It's like I'm doing all the
well,
editing.
I
I'm
see your
doing
investment behind you there.
well, yeah, yeah. Well, it used to be a lot more, but we sold them off to buy a couch. So,
Oh,
but
okay. Well, there
you
you
know,
go. They're assets now. Yeah, I have things
exactly.
like that. That stuff you put back, and 30 years go by, and you go, oh, well, maybe somebody may want this. But
Well,
my
I get that
my
from my
all I'm
dad.
trying to say there, I sound like everybody else, but all I'm trying to say is, if anybody, you talking about ripple effects and butterfly effects and all that. If
Yeah.
anybody, and look, I was just, I hate this, sounds so trite, but like, I was a kid in Oklahoma who never thought, I was watching the cons in New York and LA, and I go, well, I'll never be able to get to that. I'll never be able to do that. And and then you would kind of build your local stuff, but eventually the world changed, and there are ways, desktop publishing, laser printers, and you put your passion out, and don't know where it's going to wind up, and somebody somewhere off might see you. Like, one person might be an entry point, or
Yeah.
good Lord, now we have this. People put this out, and some people, they take off. It's like, the old thing about the overnight. What is it? The not
The overnight success.
Yeah, the overnight sensation, the overnight
Yeah. You
success.
never
Yeah, well,
know.
it was like 15 years of overnight before they got to that point, or 10 or
You don't know
5.
what you can do if you don't try, and
Right.
What Gretzky say? You miss 100% of the shots you don't take. So
Very nice. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. And even
Oh,
though you look and you think, well, I'm reading and writing into Interstat, the letterzine, and back in the day, and like uh 35 of these people are all debating about Spock and Vulcans and Ponfar, and there's five of us talking about, I wonder what the Andorians and Tellarites are, or whatever. And even though you think, well, just keep on doing for you and what you want to do, because you don't know, you may not be in the metric. Good Lord, if there's anything that shows that there's more people involved than what the numbers show, whether it's original series or Enterprise or whatever, just do it. Just do
yeah.
whatever you want to do. And if you go into it thinking, if you have a goal, if you say, well, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do a pitch packet, and I'm going to write this because I'm going to do a whole empire, and I'm going to do the book and the movie and the game and the book, all that high level strategizing, oh, you can do that. But if you don't have to just start off doing what you want. And not everybody gets to that. But if you are really not just passionate, but if you like really feel like this is driving you and you've got to get this out, and if you look, the other thing is if you look around and you don't see anybody else can give you what you want, either
Make
you're
it happen.
really, 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 really weird, or that's a sign that you may have something that nobody is providing yet. So, not to
Exactly.
get all
Make it.
overly crass about it, but if you look around and you want something, then go do it yourself. And chances are you know, you might be the first one to jump in and be the one doing it. And people all go, oh, yeah. And people didn't know what they needed or wanted till you showed them.
I appreciate that. That's a good way of looking at everything, Larry. Larry, thank you for your time so much. I appreciate everything. I know I'm going
I,
to end up seeing you on Tuesday if you're on time. And although I
you'll
like it
see
when
me
you're not
Tuesday.
on time because I have to go pick up my wife around then. So,
Well,
but
there you go. It's kind of wacky. I try, everybody. I try. It'd be, I John snaps the whip at me for Trek Files to stay at 20 minutes. So we I've heard from a couple of people that say, you were kind of stepping on that guest last time on the Trek Files. You were kind of, and I'm like, it's only because I'm watching the clock and you have to jump in. That's the only time, most of the time I have Tim
yeah,
Peel for 4 hours on guest eight or something. Most of the time it goes, but the Trek Files have been my good try to stay in the try to stay in the box. Anyway, Ed, I appreciate everything you're doing. You came out of nowhere to me, and now my God, look at what you're doing. And I'm so glad you got this podcast, this video cast going. What do we call the hell
I'm
we
going to
call
call
it?
it a podcast because this is available everywhere. Like audio, if you listen to a podcast, it's going to be
Oh,
out
okay.
there. You want to watch it on YouTube, it's going to be there. I'm everywhere.
Okay.
So,
Then I was gesturing at your Funko dolls for everybody on audio.
no, yeah, they're rare. Yeah. All right, Larry. Well, thank you so much, and I'll see you out there.
Oh, Ed, thanks so much. Hey, Trek well, man.